Hi my friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Allie Wilkins. I am a priestess, I'm a seer, I am a mentor, I'm an author, but really the work that I do is all about weaving ancient lineages together in a way that can serve us in the modern world. So today we're going to talk about one of the things that's a huge part of that, and we're going to talk about the term priestess. So you have likely heard the term priestess before if you're watching this. And so today we're going to talk about what a priestess is, who can call themselves a priestess, and sort of what the priestess has looked like throughout history. This is going to be sort of like an introductory video to what a priestess is. I have courses that go into much more depth around this, but we can explore it a lot more and I'll probably be sharing more about it. So anyways, let's get into the intro. So what is a priestess? Well, the obvious definition is it's a female priest, but the connotation is so different. So the first time that I heard the word priestess, which was actually like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, this intrigues me. Whereas the word priest really turns me off. So I'm like, nope, I don't want anything to do with that. So you might feel similar, maybe you don't. But the word priestess is basically representative of a devotee of the goddess. So back in time, in ancient times, pre-patriarchy, around 5000 BC, our cultures were all matriarchal. They were all matrilineal, meaning that they worshipped the mother. Then as the patriarchy started to come in, we started to honor the mother and the father, which I think is probably the best solution because we can utilize aspects of the mother and masculine energy, right? We need both of those energies. But then what happened is the patriarchy really started to take over and just completely removed the mother. And I have a bunch of videos about this. I have a whole masterclass called Return to Goddess that you can watch if you want to learn more about like the specifics of what happened, which is fascinating and horrifying. But basically this removed the priestess lineage. So essentially you could think of our matriarchal cultures, basically everybody was a priestess. Everyone was honoring the mother. And priestesses can be male or female. There's no gender requirement. It's just somebody who honors the mother. But when we use the term priestess, usually we're referring to a time period of, I would say like 5,000-6,000 BC to probably like the time of Jesus. We can call ourselves priestesses now, but the priestess was really most alive in society around that time frame. So this is when, and actually before that too, because we had the temples in Sumeria and of Inanna, and then we had the temples in Egypt, and we've had these sorts of cultures all over the world. When we think of the term priestess, usually you're going to be referring to the Sumerian culture, the Egyptian culture, or Celtic culture. These roles would have been performed in other cultures, like in shamanic culture or in African culture, other than Egypt, but they didn't necessarily use those same terms, at least to my understanding. So that's sort of the feeling around the word priestess and where it's come from. So priestesses in those time frames, like I said, were devotees of the mother. They were sacred devotees of the mother. So in some cases they gave their whole lives to the temple, and so they were servants of the temple. But when I say servants, they were treated like royalty. These were people who were highly respected, but they lived their life in service, similar to what a priest does, right? They give their life to the church, and in some cases they're even celibate, and they are not allowed to marry. Like they give everything to their career or to their mission or to their calling. It's very similar with the priestess, although there's not always going to be those restrictions in terms of celibacy, that sort of thing, but sometimes there were. So there's like so much I can talk about with this. So let's talk about who can call themselves a priestess. I think if you are drawn to the term priestess and you're curious about it and you're interested and you've done your study, or you've remembered past lifetimes, or you've been working in that lineage, you can call yourself a priestess. First of all, who is the judge that says what you can call yourself? But I remember that this was a question I had maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I was like, I deeply resonate with this. This feels like home to me. this feels like what was missing when I went to church. I was like, this doesn't feel like the temple that I'm used to in my, excuse me, in my subconscious. So if it feels like that for you, you've likely had many lifetimes in serving as a priestess or living in areas that had temples, and you would go visit the priestesses, and they would, there were so many roles that priestesses performed in the temples in terms of healing services. And as we go throughout time, some of you watching this may resonate more with the term witch or something related to that. And basically what so many people have said is that witches are basically priestesses without a temple, because at a certain point the goddess temples were destroyed. I believe the last goddess temple is documented to be destroyed around 500 BC. So then there's all these people who have, for tens of thousands of years, have performed these roles, at least for a few thousand years have performed these roles in a specific temple in a certain way. And then the temple's just removed, and all of that knowledge, where does it go, right? So most of the time it had to go underground. It was either, well, two things. It was either killed off, and things like the Great Inquisition, like the witch trials, but far before that time period, that's like in the last 500 years, last 500 to 1,000 years. People had to go underground far before that, because this sort of wisdom and knowledge wasn't accepted after a certain time period. Early, like I would say probably 3rd and 4th centuries, it really had to go completely dark. You couldn't tell people what you were doing. So for that reason, there's a lot of trauma related to the priestess. So anyways, back to the initial question, who can call themselves a priestess? If you feel drawn to that lineage, you can call yourself a priestess. For me, it's about integrity. It's about, are you living your life in a way that a priestess would? Or do you just think it's a cool title and you want to look cool in front of your friends? But it's not so well known that like that's really a thing, right? So for me, just think about, am I being in integrity if I'm calling myself a priestess? There's no one who can validate, yes, you're a priestess, but no, you're not. So it's about integrity, right? And especially if you're going to be calling yourself a high priestess, like that's something that I actually deeply struggle with, even though I know that I am a high priestess. There's a lot of, that's a very, very, very high title to call yourself. So I don't call myself that in public, but I will happily say, hey, what do you do? I'm a priestess. What are you? So anyways, I would say with the high priestess or with higher titles, that's a big bestowal that someone would be giving you. That's not just like an everyday thing, right? One of my friends says like everybody wants to be the high priestess. So have integrity for the titles that you're calling yourself. But if you resonate with it, just call yourself that. It's, you know, it's different from like, just calling yourself a regular priestess is different from like, oh, I'm a doctor, right? Well, to be a doctor, you have to graduate from getting your doctorate, right? You have to go to medical school. There are things that say this is what is required for you to be a doctor. But for the priestess, there is no temple for us today. So there's not any doctrine that's, or teaching or like mentorship that says this is what you need to do in order to be a priestess. Even if you know, there are groups and certifications and stuff that it's like, okay, you'll be an ordained priestess. Okay, but that's just one person saying what you need to do in order to do that. So it's all about integrity. So what does a priestess actually do? So priestesses in the temples of Egypt, each temple would be very different. So based on the culture and based on the lineage. So for example, Egyptian cultures really worshipped and worked more with the sky, because a lot of their nourishment came from the sun, right? You think about Egypt, it's a desert culture, which some people say that back then it actually wasn't a desert. There was more fertility. I guess still somewhat that environment, but like more fertile and lush than it is now. Versus if you're looking at European temples or like the Celtic traditions, those would have very different practices. They would actually be working more with the earth, working more with, like Druids worshipped the trees and they were the protectors of the trees. So depending on what lineage you're looking at, the practices are going to be different. The structures are going to be different. So for example, in Egypt, I'm scratching my third eye, maybe some information's coming in. So in Egypt, the temples would be grandiose, right? They would create these beautiful homes where the goddess would be said to live. The goddess and the gods would be said to live. Whereas the druids, which druids were actually male, I forget what female druids are called, like druidess, but druids actually, just interestingly, side note, separated themselves by gender. So they had different practices based on the gender that they were operating in, which is interesting. So anyways, druids didn't have they didn't have temples. Their temple was the forest. They only would worship in natural spaces. So again, there's going to be differences with each lineage, but let's just talk about the Egyptian temples, because I feel for some reason like whoever's going to be watching this, that's probably going to be what you're drawn to. So the Egyptian temples, there would have been so many different roles for a priestess. There could be, for example, ceremonial priestesses who, like, you see my background here, that's definitely one of my roles. I love creating ceremonies, and I've created a lot of those in my business and the products that I offer. But even in my home space, like I'm in my bedroom now, I have altars everywhere. Not like a hoarder's house or something, but like I create beautiful spaces. And so here, like, you can just see one little example. This is a temple this is my altar to Lakshmi, and also just to like the Venus path and the goddesses of Venus. But you can see I have like rose quartz. I have a rose quartz picture frame back here. I have a big rose quartz. I have a Lakshmi candle. I have the red roses, the tall candles, and then Lakshmi up here. Over here, I have more of my Egyptian temples. I have more of a shamanic altar over here. So that would be one role, like creating offerings, bringing offerings daily to the temples. This is something that you can also see like present day in Bali. I'm sure that there's other places as well, probably India. But like I've been to Bali a few times, and you'll see the women come out, like just the hotel owners or like little restaurant owners or something. They go out, everybody goes out and brings offerings. I think it's 3 times a day to the people that they're worshiping, to the gods that they're worshiping. So this is still something that's practiced. So that could be one of the roles. There's so many different roles, you guys. Like it could be the person who's creating the essential oils, the anointer, the person who is growing the herbs and working with the healing elements, like working with the elemental realms for healing. It can be related to sound healing. So somebody coming, for example, people coming into the temple for healings of some sort, and there's sound. So the person doing this sound healing. There could be sacred sexual healing. So a lot of people don't know this who are coming in new to the priestess world. There were sexual priestesses who performed sexual healing with people. Now, this would be very different than what we see today in strip clubs, or if you are like a sex worker. In some cases, some people are doing this in a very sacred way. These were people who were highly revered, highly respected. This would have been a completely different environment than, I think, honestly, anything that we can really even fathom in today's world. So people might come in for sexual healing. For example, in the later patriarchal times, this started to come into practice a lot more as we went into a much more like warring society. And so soldiers would come back from war, and it's famously called taking the war out of men. So the priestesses would then perform healings with the men, and it wouldn't always be like, the term sexual could be used in a lot of different ways, because Shakti power is sexual energy. Our life force energy is sexual energy. That's all the same force field. So they could be using that in a lot of different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were like having intercourse with them, but it could mean that too. I'm honestly not 100% sure, but I know that it could look a lot of different ways. So anyways, that could be one of the roles that was performed. There would be sacred dancing that would be for the pharaohs. There's so many different ways that this could be performed. There are many different paths to being a priestess. And of course, like I said, this would vary based on the lineage and culture that you were in and what you were actually doing. So let me think if there's anything else that I want to add to this. The priestess lineage is coming back very strongly, and it's coming back because in the world, you're probably already aware of this, we are having a massive revival of the feminine because the removal of the feminine has caused destruction in every element. And it's not because the masculine energy is toxic, it's because both energies need each other. And with my clients, I'll say this a lot to them, like, feminine energy on its own in today's world sometimes can be really like airy-fairy, because also our feminine energy, we don't see a widespread usage of the warrior power that is available with feminine energy. We think of feminine energy as being like light and sweet and sexual and seductive and like creative, but what's left out is the Underworld Goddess, which was demonized hardcore by the Christian faith, especially like early on. This was majorly demonized. Literally, the underworld is called hell. The underworld is not hell. A lot of people say that it's like a being in the womb of the cave, right? We talk about this as like the void, the empty space. But the underworld is a little bit different, actually. It's you're going into your shadow self, but the church labeled that as being hell. So we don't accept that part of the goddess, the rage, the primal goddess, the wild goddess, the uncontrollable force. That's conveniently left out of our view of the feminine. So anyways, what I was gonna say is our common picture of the feminine today can be this person who's really airy-fairy. They don't like know how to they're not great at making decisions. They're kind of floating in the light world. But so we need all aspects. My point was that person really needs masculine energy. The person who's embodying that needs masculine energy to ground themselves, to create structure, to hold the feminine. And so we truly need both. But the feminine is really coming back right now as in a major revival, which is why many of us are remembering our priestess lifetimes. And many of us who have been in the role of the priestess have served under many different lineages, because also a lot of these were practiced at different time periods. So you might resonate with one lineage more than others. That might also change as you unlock different levels of, or different parts of your soul that want to be reactivated. So just as an example, for me, I was initially drawn to the Egyptian temples, but then I was really drawn to the shamanic temples, which wouldn't have been called that same sort of thing, but it's the same vibe. And then I'm being really drawn to the Celtic lineage. And so many of us have had many lifetimes, and we're masters in so many areas of the priestess. And now our job is to remember that, to activate these parts of ourself and to accept them, because they've been demonized and shamed, and we've been killed for them in many, many, many lifetimes. So I see this constantly in my Akashic Records work. Like, so many people have deep past life traumas, or just things that are still affecting them from those time periods, especially if you feel judgmental of your gifts or afraid of your gifts, or you're repressing them, or you like know something is there but you're afraid to tap into it. That's a classic sign that you have intense past life trauma. So and all of us, if anyone has been a priestess in another life, there's trauma associated because the feminine was removed. So I'll probably do another video about this later, but just touching on this real quick, the feminine was like, we were revered in the temples as the goddess, as the representation of the goddess on earth. Then it's like the rug was pulled out from underneath us, and we were basically like all of a sudden whores and prostitutes and nothing. Our role was completely demeaned, and that's when the church really took over. And I have other videos about that as well. So yeah, if you resonate with this video, or you feel that you have any wounding, or just you're interested in learning more about becoming a priestess, or really owning that title within yourself and experiencing the energy of the priestess awakening within you, I have a really cool program that I just created that I'm very, very excited about. It's called Mary Magdalene as High Priestess. And so you don't need to know about Mary Magdalene in order to do this course. It's really about healing the wounds of the priestess and coming more in tune with what a priestess is and how you can activate those parts of yourself. So Mary Magdalene was a high priestess, as was Mother Mary, as was her mother Anna. And I call Mary Magdalene the last high priestess, although there have been others probably underground since then. She's the last major face of it. And what I found in my own experience in reclaiming my own priestess energy from like being, oh, I'm a priestess, like I can't say that to other people. Now I'm proud about it. Like my whole life is literally dedicated to this work. I've given my whole life to the goddess. And anyways, so what I have learned, the things that I've healed, so much of that has come from Mary Magdalene or from the temples of goddess Isis, who Mary Magdalene was an initiate of. So what I've created is the 4 faces of the Magdalene that really serve in healing these wounds of the priestess and in activating your priestess to the next level. Whether you're totally new to this and you're like, I don't even know what a priestess is, but I feel called to it. Or you're like, I know that I'm a priestess, but I also feel incredibly wounded. I also feel deep grief at the trauma that I've experienced in these other lifetimes, which I can remember. So wherever you are on that scale, this will serve you. And this is an experience that you can keep coming back to. All of my programs, this is my aim, that you can continue coming back to it over and over and over and get something new out of it. So this is a 4-week experience. It's a short little month experience for now, but it's packed. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have 4 modules, 1 per week, that are gonna go over the face of the Magdalene and that wound that we're healing for that week. And then we're gonna have a live group call where we're gonna go over an additional teaching related to that. But we're also gonna be doing an Akashic record healing. So both of them are gonna be wonderful, but the Akashic record healings are where you actually can go beyond the present moment, go beyond what you see as being real now into past lifetimes, into the like recesses of your soul, and start to find and identify spaces that require healing. So it's going to be really powerful. I'm very, very excited for this. I'm going to put the link in the comments below so that you can sign up. This will be something that's probably available all year, but it's only going to be live for this specific period. So I would encourage doing it now because, one, it's going to be the best price, but also because you can join the calls live. You can ask questions and you'll inform what's really shared in this first round. So we're starting August 11th. It's called Mary Magdalene as High Priestess, Healing Your Inner Priestess. And yeah, I invite you to sign up. You can ask me any questions in the comments below, or if you want to email me, aliwilkinsabundance@gmail.com, or message me on Instagram. All of those are good. So yeah, I hope that you join if you feel called to this lineage, if you feel really called to this path and you want to deepen your embodiment of it. It's going to be a really beautiful experience. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. If you had any other questions about just the priestess path in general, feel free to put them in the comments. I am going to be making a couple more videos about the priestess, but I also would invite you to watch the Invoking Mary Magdalene ceremony that's on my website. I'll put that in the comments as well. And yeah, if you liked this video, please like the video, the thumbs up thing, subscribe, share it. That helps more people find this. And as always, if you feel called to donate anything to this channel, I am always deeply appreciative of that, but I don't expect it at all. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Have a beautiful day. Bye.